Welcome to another episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. Our co-hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers in store, online, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Shri and Peter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. I'm your co-host, Peter V.S. Bond. I'm also the Vice President of Retail Strategy at Power Reviews. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host. He's a CPG e-commerce luminary. He's an entrepreneur in his own right. Please join me in welcoming my co-host, Shri Rajagopalan. Shri, how are you?
Thank you so much, Peter, and we can't wait to get started today as we have a special guest for you, Anil Aggarwal, the man himself.
Yeah, I'm very excited about our guest today too. I've known him for 17 years. I even worked for him for a hot minute. He is a self-described 7-time startup CEO. Most recently, he launched a series of omni-channel trade conferences known as Shop Talk and Grocery Shop. And late last year, he and his partners who founded that sold it to the Hive Group for an enormous amount of money that I can't even begin to fathom, but good on him. And I'll finish by saying that were it not for the pandemic, we would most certainly be conducting this podcast interview at tableside at his permanent spot at Keen's Steakhouse in near Herald Square in Manhattan. So with that, please join me all in welcoming Anil Aggarwal. Anil, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Peter, Shri, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you on board. We love your conferences. I think you know, Anil, when I attended the 2018 Grocery Shop event, I penned an article on LinkedIn about how game-changing it was. And we're just so excited to be able to talk to you about what's going on there and how that all came about. But what I wanted to do was start off with just getting a background on you personally and what led you in this direction. Back in the late 80s, you graduated from college, you went into accounting, you decided to get your JD at Boston University, pardon me, don't want to make that mistake. At BU, you then went to clerk for a state Supreme Court justice in Pennsylvania, joined after that a few law firms in M&A, and suddenly you get the startup bug. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to get into the prepaid financial services business after having gone a much more traditional M&A route in the legal profession?
Sure, we're going way back, and I'm happy to do that and share some of that early journey with you guys.
Sure.
It wasn't as much of a change as it appears to be. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. I remember as early as 11 years old coming home from school, calling my dad, who owned and ran a plastics manufacturing business in London, and asking him if he could come pick me up and take me to the factory with him. And it was really a way of life for us. He would bring home various products that they would create in the factory. It was mostly costume jewelry, and my mom and a small team of people at the house would package the costume jewelry up, and my dad would be out selling it to everything from major retailers to vendors in flea markets. So the entrepreneurial bug actually bit me really early on. Although if you look at my experience and education in the 90s, it might not seem that way. What I did was, wanted to get a good, solid education. In fact, in the early 90s, when I was applying for law school, had thought about applying to business school and getting an MBA. But there was a recession in 1990 and 91. And there was a lot of question about how useful an MBA was, especially coming out of the roaring 80s. So I decided that law would probably be a better education, and I did that and decided to go back to school, all as a premise to eventually go into business. And actually, my first business was it's not on my LinkedIn profile, and It's going way back, and I don't talk about it a whole lot. But I actually started a agribusiness in Kenya when I was 27 in 1997. It became one of the largest farming operations in East Africa, and it produced specialty vegetables for air freight to the European market. So it wasn't as much of a shift from being an accountant and being a lawyer, neither of which I really admit to that much, and most people don't know that part of me, which I'm entirely happy about. But it wasn't that much of a change in direction as it might appear to be.
Great.
Wow. Wow. First of all, Anil, thank you again for joining us today. Having spoken on many of the trade shows that you've actually started, whether as a keynote or whether as a panel guest or, you know, one of the classes, the master classes that I've actually given at the shows, it's an honor to have you today. But as I think through what you just said, agro business in Africa, and then at some point, I'm sure I've heard you say that you did Hilary, Duff gift cards. Take us through the journey of how you got from agro gift cards to Hilary, Duff gift cards, from agro businesses in Africa to Hilary, Duff gift cards, to omni-channel retail trade shows, which came to be known as Shop Talk and Grocery Talk. Just give us the journey, give us the scoop here.
Sure. So I guess you're talking about a 15-year period there. So if I were to spend even 30 seconds on each year, that would be a 7-minute answer. I'll try and keep it shorter than that.
We'll take
although
it.
I am known for squeezing 15-minute discussions into an hour. But let me give it a shot here. So when, you know, I remember sitting in Bunda in Tanzania, at a Citibank in a car, and thinking, you know, when I get, and this is in 1999, and I thought, when I go back to the U.S., I really want to start on that entrepreneurial journey full time, and it seemed like the absolute right time to do it because of the because of everything going on with technology, with the internet, and with .coms at the time. So as someone who had always wanted to be an entrepreneur, it felt that this was really the right time. The question was, what do you do? And what do you do in the face of what appeared to be an endless amount of opportunity and possibility? So I worked through a lot of different business models. I did a lot of research about the different types of companies that were being created at the time. I went to a lot of new media and internet events myself. And ultimately, what I settled on was using the existing payment networks, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and Discover, to automate payments outside of the traditional uses of those networks, which were deposit access and credit access with traditional debit cards and credit cards, using those payment networks in new use cases by internet enabling them. Now, I wouldn't have been able to tell you in 1999 or 2000 in that kind of articulated way exactly what we were doing, but in retrospect, that is probably the best way to describe it. So when you talk about creating, you know, Hilary Duff gift cards, the use of these payment networks to create gift cards that could be sold online or even sold on J-hooks at retail stores was one of those use cases. There were many others. We created a technology company that allowed for these products to exist. That technology held the balance on the card so that when the card was used at a merchant and that transaction was routed to us to be approved or declined, we had various user-facing front-end capabilities that allowed people to check balances and engage with their accounts. So we created a comprehensive, what is called issuing side processor. And we were the first processor to do things like create flexible spending account cards, where you could use your flexible spending accounts directly at a healthcare or transit provider and we would reconcile those on the back end with payroll. That was another use case that we did. The use of these products in the incentives industry, what's become known as general purpose reloadable cards that are used by mostly by people who don't have access to traditional credit or might be maxed out on their credit lines or frankly don't even have access to traditional banking services. We did an example of that is we did a program with Russell Simmons where we created the Rush card. And there were many unique components to the types of products we were creating. For example, with the Rush card, we needed the ability to be able to load that card with cash offline. And so we did an integration into MoneyGram, and we became MoneyGram's largest New York area client loading Rush cards. So I love the reference to the Hilary Duff card. Peter, I remember us working on that together. It's a great memory, so I appreciate you bringing that up.
No kidding, Peter didn't mention that to me, that he actually worked on the Hilary Duff gift cards with you.
He did, and many others. In fact, this was one of the areas of specialty that Peter had, which was co-branding gift cards with celebrities and doing licensing deals and other things to create a whole new product set.
Yeah, I still have my Elvis Presley gift cards framed, and they hang on the wall in my office. So
I'm going to want to see those.
Those were fun times.
As do I.
Well, Anil, after selling that business to TSYS and launching their prepaid division, you spent some time at Google. You created an industry association for prepaid, even a number of other activities around there. And then this shift into omnichannel retail. Where did you see the opportunity? How did that come about?
That is a great question. So this experience that I had in creating what was essentially an entirely new product line of financial services. Obviously, we weren't the only ones doing it. There were some other, many great companies, in fact, that were doing that kind of pioneering. But one of the things that became evident to me was that there are some things that individuals or individual companies can accomplish, but there are some things that are done better if you act collectively. And so as you mentioned it earlier, one of the things that I did in this particular sector of what's become known as prepaid, network branded prepaid cards, was I created a trade association to bring the industry together to help inform media and consumer groups about the utility and usefulness of these products, to help educate legislators and regulators about the products and work on things like disclosures for the industry that we could all get behind that would be fair for consumers. So my first experience in really community building activities, let's call it more broadly, was creating a trade show, a publishing business, and a nonprofit trade association for this segment of financial services. And after the sale of this particular technology company, starting another one, and then selling that one to Google, as you just mentioned, that happened all over again. This time, it wasn't about a specific segment of financial services. It was all of financial services. So in 2011, I look back at what had happened in financial services over the last decade, and specifically the impact on financial services of the great financial crisis. And if you were to go back before the financial crisis and you were at a cocktail party and you were to talk to anyone about being in fintech, that was a surefire signal for them to go refresh their drink. Fintech today is one of the hottest segments of tech. And the great financial crisis is one of the key events that facilitated that transition. And let me just take a minute to explain why that's the case. Up until the financial crisis, it was really hard to innovate at the head of the demand curve in financial services. what I described in terms of prepaid, what others were doing in the late 90s and early 2000s relative to financial services can best be described as long tail innovation. They were not reinventing the core bank account experience or banking experience or traditional credit card. They were basically taking heavily paper-based and manual processes within financial services and automating them. And that was the definition of fintech. Coming out of the financial crisis with the creation of things like the CFPB with the enactment of Dodd-Frank, financial services started thinking more openly about innovation, about the consumer, and about how they needed to change their products, their consumer experiences, their relationship with the consumer around things like fundamental fairness. And so you saw a change in organizations and their willingness, but I would even go further and say need to innovate. So in 2011, using that same experience that I had in community building in the prepaid world, I started an event called Money 2020 to bring together the broad financial services and payments industry so that they could work collectively on creating a future that that integrated innovation far more for the next 10 years than they had integrated in the past 10 years. And so, so Money 2020 was an incredible success. I think it was, for a long period of time, probably the single most important industry-wide initiative in bringing people together to collaborate to create this new future of payments and financial services. And I like to think, because a lot of people have told me so, that actually it also served as a catalyst for the development of the fintech industry. So,
you know, Anil, I was part of PepsiCo back then in 2011 when you started it. And I remember we used to even have attendees from PepsiCo Financial Services going to the event, which I think is nothing short of extraordinary what you accomplished there with Money 2020.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks for being part of it so early on. We sold Money 2020 in 2014. It was done as an initiative to really help bring the industry together. As someone who worked in the industry, my vision for what it should be was to be the show that I would like to go to. And so once it was, established, it seemed to make sense that it was time to move on. That was 2014. In 2015, I sat down and thought, what should I do next? And what I realized was that the same thing that happened in fintech and financial services in terms of transformation of the industry was beginning to happen on the other side of the coin, the commerce side of the coin. So, so I started looking into what are all of the different ways that the industry is innovating when it comes to retail and e-commerce. And just as importantly, where is the industry focused right now? What are they doing? How are they embracing that innovation? Or are they not embracing it to the extent that they should be? And in fact, what I found was something very, very similar to fintech in 2011. And so innovation in retail, from my perspective, sitting down in 2015, looked like innovation in retail, in financial services in 2011. And so I felt that there was the same opportunity to bring to the retail and e-commerce industry the kind of community and benefit of creating community that I had been able to bring to the fintech world through Money 2020. And that was the genesis of Shop Talk. So that finally connects the dots, Peter and Sri, of how do you get from the Hilary Duff gift card to creating Shop Talk.
Brilliant. What a fascinating story, Anil. But if I think about Shop Talk, I've been to each one of these virtually every year you've had them. And if I think about the success you've had in scaling Shop Talk, and I look at all the other industry events, because I've probably been to every industry event in e-commerce that possibly exists, starting with the ones from Kantar to RetailNet, Planet Retail, you name it. None of them have experienced the success that you did. Your attendee base grew from about 500 in year one to thousands within like 2 years, and then literally peaking somewhere closer to the 5-digit mark in like 4 years. What do you think went into that success? Like, why did Shop Talk succeed extraordinarily well compared to the others? Does it have to do with like consumer centric thinking? Like, what was on your mind that got it to scale so quickly?
It has to do with the culmination of a few things. One was, I think, from looking at it internally. One of the reasons was that we weren't trying to start another event. We were trying to create a new community that we felt would be critical. And so when I described to people what we were doing, they heard me describe the creation of a new event rather than really the creation of a new community, for the most part. And so when people would focus on that and ask me at the very beginning, so how does Shop Talk compare to other events in retail? I would simply answer it by saying, I don't know, I've never been to a retail event. We didn't create Shop Talk by going to other retail events and thinking we could do a better job than everybody else does. The entire premise of Shop Talk was to bring together everyone from established retailers and brands to startup D2C companies, startup tech companies, established tech and internet companies, but also Wall Street in the form of sell-side analysts, the media, the investment community, and help them to do all of the things that they were already doing, but way less efficiently, in a distributed fashion, which was create the future of retail through community. So inward looking, I think that a main part of the reason we were successful is that we just had a different mission from the very beginning. I think the second reason we were successful is that we looked at what was happening in terms of the conversation that people were having. And at the time in 2015, the retail conversation was dominated by omnichannel. And omnichannel was focused mostly on systems integration, inventory alignment around the offline channel and the online channel. Offline and online had been created as two distinct channels, and that was okay before the smartphone, but once the smartphone really gained traction, it needed to be a single unified experience. But in 2015, that probably represented 20% of what the retail industry should have been focused on. But it was 80% of the conversation, and it was crowding out the rest of the opportunities and challenges that retail had. And what we wanted to do with Shop Talk was help reset the conversation. And so that was also something that I think it was difficult for people to understand early on, and certainly in 2015, when we first introduced Shop Talk as something we felt was critical for the industry. But it became pretty obvious to people really starting in Q1 of 2016. If you look at pretty much any stock price chart of any major retailer, with some key exceptions, starting in Q1 of 2016 is really when retail started its decline. And by decline, what I mean is that kind of a period of transformation that started with going from a period of certainty to a period of uncertainty and creating a lot of confusion. So for example, up until that period of time, if you wanted to grow as a retail business, the path was kind of clear. You opened another store, but you don't open too many stores when you've opened one too many stores. You realize you've overstored when you've created way too many stores, way more stores than you actually need. And so 2016 represented kind of this tipping point of a reckoning of things that people had done in the past, that was overbuilding, overstoring, you know, a reckoning of the mall experience. But it was that was happening at the same time as, you know, the rise of digitally native brands, as more consumers were shifting to shopping on their mobile devices. So you had this unique convergence of factors where, if you add in what we were trying to accomplish, you had a unique period in time in 2015 and 16 in retail, just like you did with fintech in 2011 and 2012, for the industry to really rethink, how do we work together? What does our future look like? How do we disrupt ourselves, or let others disrupt us? And so, you know, in an engineered way, I guess we were at the right place at the right time. Part of how we looked at it was that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So one of the ways that we communicated to the industry that their world was going to change was simply to look at what the hundreds of venture-backed companies that were already creating the future were doing, to organize that information and then present it back to the industry as a possible view of what the future would look like. And what we found was that resonated. And it resonated, Shri, I'm going to correct some numbers here, even more than you mentioned. The growth of Shop Talk was actually greater than the growth of Money 2020. We had 3,000 people at our first event in Shop Talk, and our last event, which was the fourth, held in 2019, unfortunately we haven't and won't have one in person this year, had grown to almost 9,000, and we were well on track to be past 10,000 for March 2020, when we had to cancel the event at the beginning of that month.
Oh, I would be surprised if it wouldn't have hit closer to the 15,000, because, you know, listening to you, I dissected quite a few words of wisdom you've passed on here to entrepreneurs. One was, you don't need to copy, do something unique, but you also were very humble when you said right place, right time. To me, the difference between success and no success as an entrepreneur is having the savviness to know when it's the right place at the right time. In 2015, I remember sitting at those NACDS conversations when every SVP and EVP of merchandising would specifically ask about omnichannel. It was early in the game. It was exactly what you said, which was a lot about IT and the systems and technology. And the third thing I hear you said is the word community, which we will definitely talk about later. But the difference between creating just another event to be there and capture share, which our industry obsesses over that metric, versus creating a community and giving people exactly what they want to hear, very different from just another event. It's just fascinating to hear that.
You know, it's interesting what you say about advice to entrepreneurs. You know, I think that there is a temptation, at least, to try to benchmark against the competition. And you know, my view of entrepreneurship is very simple. That things that are done today can be done 10 to 100 times better. You are unlikely to figure out a 10 to 100 times better way of doing something by looking at what someone does today. You are way more likely to figure that out by looking at how things should be. And that means focusing, instead of on the competition, on things like the customer or the consumer, or more global shifts and trends in values, for example, that different generations have. And when you see where things are heading, you can build for that. And it is unlikely that if you have someone who's established, that's been doing things the way that they've done them for and being successful with it for quite some time, they're unlikely to be thinking that way. And so my view is that unless you can create something that is at least 10 times and hopefully more like 100 times better than what's already out there, then it's just simply not the best use of your time. There's probably other things you should be doing. So,
Anil, when I think about creating a community in the omni-channel commerce space, the parts of the ecosystem are the retailer, the manufacturers, and the solution providers. And it's kind of a trickle down. The the solution providers show up if the brands are there, and the brands show up if the retailers are there. I think what impressed me most about Grocery Shop and the very first launch of that is you didn't just have a couple of big retailers and big titles, you had a whole lot of them. And I'm really curious to understand how you were able to get such influencers in this space to want to participate in this community.
I think it was a few things. Like anything else, it, probably doesn't come down to just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that I saw was that large retail definitely followed startup retail. And same is true with brands, manufacturers. At the very beginning, I made about 100 phone calls to the CEOs of some of the best known and most disruptive brands, from Casper to The Honest Company, Stitch Fix. And in some cases, these are, hybrids as well, but a broad range of retailers and brands. And I remember out of those first 100 phone calls, it didn't take long for the CEOs to buy into what we were creating with ShopTalk. It resonated with them. They felt that it was needed, and they were willing to sign on. At the very first ShopTalk, if I recall correctly, we ended up with about 135 CEOs of these types of companies. And I think that resonated with traditional retail, not with all retail at the same time in equal measures, but over time, it did. We saw, the early adopters be very curious with that, want to learn from that, from large retail. But we also saw laggards. I had, several conversations with very prominent CEOs of retailers who were very late in understanding what was happening in retail. And I understood that through their reaction to ShopTalk and their willingness to support it. I had, CEOs that I had asked to speak in year one decline to speak, buy tickets and attend to join the event as an attendee in year two. And so I think that part of it was this critical mass of the startup community. I think some of it, as I mentioned, was that by 2016, Q1, right before we held the first show, there was already a sense within retail that things were about to change dramatically. And so individuals responsible for digital, for e-commerce, for innovation, it took a little bit longer to get people from things like store operations on the brand and manufacturer side. I think that there was a sense that some of the more traditional and older brands were not resonating in terms of their authenticity and other reasons with consumers that the way that they had in the past. And so there was this, gradual build of people recognizing that ShopTalk was perfectly aligned with the real changes they were experiencing. And it seemed to make sense for them to be part of it. And so we not only got amazing, very, very senior level speakers, but the attendees were C-level. They were EVPs, SVPs, and VPs, and continue to be. So I think it was this combination of everything that just made sense. And our standard for our shows is that we want people to love our shows. And when something's resonating on that level where, they feel they need help understanding what's going on, or they want to showcase and contribute the special things they're doing, they want to be in a peer group of people that are charting, the future in the same way. I refer to these people, I think of them not as attendees. I don't think of them as professionals within retail. I think we live in a world where these are change makers, and that the ability to make change is actually now distributed down to the individual even within large companies. And so it's people recognizing that they have the ability to make a really big difference, and then giving them the tools and platform and experience and access that allows them to engage in that change that they want to undertake.
Great.
You know, Anil, when I look back at both the community shop talk and grocery talks, I think a scale has come by to both of those where having decision makers at the senior most levels has almost become an automatic, where it's created an aura if you weren't at shop talk and grocery talk, you really don't belong to the tribe, which again, I think is just fascinating how you made that happen. But one of the secret sauces that Peter and I were kind of discussing of the success of both communities at levels maybe down the decision maker, maybe at the director level, the senior manager level, the brand manager level, etc., has been the hosted meeting programs that you'll have where you have service providers meeting with maybe a given attendee or 6 times over, things of that nature. Tell us a little bit more about how you work that out and why do you feel that it resonates so well with brands, even retailers participate in it, and then obviously service providers are the ones that really want to be in the middle of it. But how does all this come together?
I think the hosted retailers and brands program did unbelievably well. And the reason that it did so well was because it solved a problem. And I think that the things that scale quickest and that get the best feedback, that give you the highest NPS score, are things that address problems where, especially where people knew there was a problem, but nobody ever really did anything about it, and that it was going on for a really long time. So, you know, if you take the example of an exhibit hall, you know, if we were to go back to say 1995 or earlier than that, going to a trade show, walking through an exhibit hall was of incredible value. You know, you would be able to find all the different technology and solution providers that could help you run your business more efficiently, modernize your business. You go booth to booth, you're having lots of valuable conversations. You're taking materials back to your office or your home. You're going through them, and there's an incredible amount of discovery that is happening. There's an incredible amount of relationship building that was possible. But when you add in the fact that kind of discovery and research can be done online, means that the utility of an exhibit hall has declined, and its role has changed. But for the most part, the approach that an event organizers take to creating that exhibit hall and the experience that attendees have hasn't changed. So I think that what happened was that exhibit halls had greater value 25 years ago than they do today. I think they're still valuable, and I'll talk about that. But the role of exhibit halls has changed and their value has changed. But the format hasn't. The approach to creating the exhibit hall hasn't. The approach to using the exhibit hall for lead gen has changed the same. And so simply what's happened for both sides, the buyers who are there looking for solutions, the exhibitors that are there selling and promoting their solutions, they continue to do the same thing they did 25 years ago, but they're just simply less happy with it. They get less out of it. It's less productive for them. And so what we did was, leading up to our 2018 show, we focused mostly on the exhibitors that we knew were there to generate leads, the exhibitors that were there to grab the attendee that's walking by and try to sell them something. Frequently, these were the exhibitors that had smaller booths. Generally, what we found was that exhibitors with larger booths were there to have meetings with established partners, with existing clients, to showcase new products to the media. And lead gen was a lesser part of the reason that they were exhibiting. And so we went to over 100 companies that we had already signed booth contracts with. And we said, we've decided to not sell 10 by 10 booths anymore. And I can tell you that people were absolutely shocked. I had a CEO call me up and say, we already put a deposit down on a booth that we were buying. And it's non-refundable, so can we please get our 10 by 10? And I said, look, the intent here was never for you to be out of pocket on a deposit to buy a booth. So send me the invoice and we'll reimburse that. Oh, we won't sell you a 10 by 10. And so by this time, 2018, companies wanted to be part of Shop Talk. They knew they had to be there. It was a critical part of the broad retail and e-commerce professional ecosystem. And so the next natural question for us was, well, if I can't have a 10 by 10, what can I have? And we said, well, what you're really there to do is meet with companies that you want to sell your solutions to. So we will find those people for you, and we will help you arrange the meetings. As I'm sure you can imagine, that was met with a great degree of skepticism as to whether we would be able to deliver the buy side of that experience. So on the other side of it, what we did was we knew that there were a lot of what I call change makers, as I referenced before, throughout the retail industry that would love to come to Shop Talk because it represents this new home for them, this new community that they want to be part of. But because of budget limitations or other restrictions, they simply didn't have access to Shop Talk. So what we said to them was that if they would agree to take 8 15-minute meetings, so we were asking for no more than 2 hours of their time during a 4-day period, that we would give them a free ticket to the show, and we would basically cover their travel expenses and hotel expenses so they could be at Shop Talk budget free. And our view was to ask for the least and give the most. It's just a basic philosophy of life that I have, which is lead with generosity. And that was a big part of what was behind the creation of how the implementation of the program, to ask very little from people and to give them a lot. At the same time, we wanted those meetings to be incredibly valuable to the hosted retailers and brands as buyers. So we didn't require them to take meetings that they didn't want to take. The meetings were entirely double opt-in. They had to agree to them as well. And if that meant that we can only set up, 4 out of the 8 meetings or 6 out of the 8 meetings, then that's on us. We were willing to take that risk. I think we averaged probably about 6.5 meetings per hosted retailer and brand. But eventually what we were able to do was bring thousands of retailers and brands, individuals from retailers and brands into this program. We were able to bring hundreds of companies selling solutions. We built a completely proprietary platform with what is today over a 30-person engineering team in a separate company that I own called Persona Tech. And people absolutely loved the experience. It was efficient. It addressed a specific problem that people were experiencing in the exhibit hall. The other thing that it did was it changed the dynamic of our exhibit hall into a place where people were focused on transactions and transactional behavior, into more of a community town hall, a place where people felt that they weren't going to get grabbed and solicited to come into someone's booth, but a place where they could spend time, be comfortable, interact with others, walk around, see what new products are being offered, engage with whoever they want to engage with without feeling targeted. And if you talk to the retailers and brands that go to trade shows or go to exhibit halls within more of a conference type show, this will be one of their biggest complaints. Mm-hmm. They will tell you that when they go into the exhibit hall, they turn their badge around. They don't want to be targeted. So we solved a lot of problems while at the same time updating the event format literally overnight by 25 years. This is a problem that has existed that frankly continues to exist throughout the events industry rather, and hasn't been fixed for the most part in 25 years. Given my background as a tech CEO, it seemed almost like an incredible opportunity to build something that would solve a very low-hanging fruit problem, and really deliver on the mission of creating community. So the way we look at the ShopTalk community is that it is a broad ecosystem, and within that broad ecosystem, there are very specific marketplaces. And if you were to facilitate the interaction of those marketplaces within that broad ecosystem, then the whole thing just hangs together better. It works better. People embrace it more. They value it more. They're telling you that in the NPS that they're giving you. Our NPS is consistently being above 60, which we're very happy with. So you're absolutely right. The hosted program was a key factor in the success of the program. About 50% of the retailer and brand attendees that attend ShopTalk and Grocery Shop come through the hosted program. And the hosted program in 2019, again, the last year we did it, between ShopTalk and Grocery Shop, facilitated over 10,000 meetings.
Yeah, Anil, I walked into my first show of yours skeptical about my company not investing in a booth. And then after participating in the hosted meeting programs and seeing the pure lead gen, successful lead gen that those meetings produced, I was overwhelmed. I said, we need to double down for the next show and invest much more of our finances in those hosted programs. So that was, from my standpoint, just a brilliant decision on your part. And you did address some burning issues for all the different stakeholders in that ecosystem. You took ShopTalk, which was more broadly omni-channel, and then you decided to focus in on one specific commerce vertical, grocery. Why did you take on that particular one? You could have gone after some others. What was it about grocery you saw as a logical first extension?
The reason we really focused on grocery is that it is part of the broader retail ecosystem. But when you really look at it more closely, it is a very distinct ecosystem. It consists of supermarkets, mass merchants, convenience stores, drug stores, club warehouse stores, discount stores. It's a broad range of companies that are selling products in very different formats. And so within that industry, where people get their products, how they get those products has changed and evolved, and people have a lot more options than they used to have. And so that industry is, I would say, a very distinct segment from the rest of retail. In addition to that, it wasn't on the same historical innovation and disruption curve. So the same way that I described broad retail being, say, 4 to 5 years behind fintech, grocery retail was probably 2 years behind broad retail. It was not an early adopter of e-commerce, for example. And so there was a unique community and a unique set of challenges and opportunities. In many ways, that ended up actually being an asset, that grocery could leapfrog the rest of retail. It didn't have to go back and fix for omni-channel things that had been done for many years. It was a blank sheet of paper in terms of being able to define a new user and customer experience specific to e-commerce and omni-channel. And so we felt that this needed to be a separate conversation, one where you could very easily spend 4 days digging really deep into the issues that are unique to growth CPG. For example, supply chain. The supply chain is impacted way more immediately as you change the customer experience in grocery than it is, say, in furniture or many other areas, electronics, many other areas of retail. And so it was a sector that was at a different point in its innovation. It was a community of types of retailers that was evolving. And And so it made sense to pull this out separately as a separate community, and that's what we did. And we did that. We announced that in 2018 in the spring, and we held a first show in the fall of 2018. And that first show had over 2,000 people, which we were very, very happy with.
Yeah, you vastly underestimated the response you would get to that. In fact, you basically blew out of all the available space at the hotel you chose.
So one of the things, Anil, that comes to my mind is, when I look back on the Money 2020 Money Talk journey, you started in 2011, and then 2017, you had sold it to other investors. So that was about a 7-year journey. I look at these two communities, Shop Talk and Grocery Talk. They were born in 2015. By early 2020, within, I would say, 4.5 years or so since the two communities started and attendees came to when you actually sold it to the Hyde Group. I know you're going to stay involved with both these communities, and the industry would really like you to be involved because it looks at you as the leader of these two communities making things happen. But what do you think caused this to happen within less than 5 years, much faster than Money 2020? And how did liquidity for you just come by so fast this time around?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. I guess one way of looking at it is that the liquidity was fast. Another way of looking at it is it was, kind of a reasonable amount of time. But let me take you back a little bit. So, if you were to talk to anyone that I had spoken to about Shop Talk since I created it, the plan was never to really sell it. The plan was actually to keep it. And so, we sold Money 2020 within 2 years. That was a quick exit. We ended up keeping Shop Talk for over 4 years. And the reality is that, and I'll share something personal with you here, is that we had planned to keep Shop Talk. In fact, we were expanding it into doing way more local events with something called Retail Club. We had created Grocery Shop, and we're really focused on building that. And in September of 2019, my mother passed away unexpectedly. And it was a moment of reflection for me. It was not something that I had expected to happen. And my wife, who happens to be my co-founder in these businesses, and she was the president of both Money 2020 and Shop Talk, said to me at the end of September, maybe it's time to rethink how we spend our time. And I think she was saying it not only for me, but for herself as well. And so I committed to her that I would make one phone call, and that one phone call would be to Hive. And it would be to the CEO, who has been a close friend of mine for 5 years. He actually bought Money 2020 when he was at a different company. And I would ask him if he was interested in buying it, and if he was interested in buying it, whether we could quickly come to terms, and that we would do a short transition period of 1 year so that we could move on and do other things in our lives. And I had that phone call with him. My conversation with my wife was on a Sunday. I had that conversation with Mark Shashua at Hive on Monday morning, and the deal was closed 10 weeks later. So I think it was a reasonable period of time to keep a business, to grow a business and establish it. It was probably around the same amount of time that I had run the two tech companies that I was involved in, maybe a little bit less, but we kept it for longer than we had kept Money 2020. And the plan was to keep it long term. But with that change that happened in our lives and some of the reassessment that we did at that point in time, we decided to have this conversation. If Mark had said in that conversation that he had not been interested, that he was not interested in buying it, then our agreement was that we would keep it and continue to run it. But he was very anxious to buy it. He'd wanted to buy it for a very long time, and he wanted to move quickly as well. So it was as much of a surprise, actually, frankly, I would say more of a surprise to me that we ended up selling Shop Talk and Grocery Shop than it probably was to anybody else. But that was the reason we ultimately decided to do it.
Okay. So Anil, shortly into this transition period after the sale, the pandemic hits, and it has an incredible adverse effect on trade shows in general. Certainly Shop Talk not immune to this, and you ended up with a mechanism where you essentially pushed it out to the slot where Grocery Shop typically sits in the fall and Grocery Shop moving to the spring of the following year. Would love to know about what you all are doing to keep brands and retailers and service providers engaged. How are you taking advantage of obviously a digital world to do that? And I know you've recently announced a new Shop Talk meetup solution. Would love to hear more about how you think that's going to keep engagement alive.
Sure. Let me just start off by saying a few words about the Shop Talk in person this year, which is not happening. We, as you mentioned, had originally pushed it from March to September.
Yep.
But then recently we announced 2 weeks ago that we're actually canceling it altogether this year.
Okay.
and starting it back up in March of 21.
Okay.
With Shop Talk, and then having Grocery Shop back in September of 21.
Okay.
We hope that those events will happen. We expect them to happen. But right now we're living in a period of incredible uncertainty around COVID-19. And whether it's policies and guidelines that come from governments and agencies, or state, federal, or from venues or cities. But I would say most importantly, from companies. Ultimately, whether individuals attend professional B2B events is going to be a decision that rests primarily with individuals themselves and the companies that they work for, no matter what else is going on. I think ultimately the decision is one around safety. And I think that's something that people take very seriously about themselves. And I think it's something that companies take very seriously about their teams. And we certainly don't want to be putting companies and individuals in a position to have to pick between coming to a show and their concern for their safety.
Of course.
So I think we've acted quickly and decisively in terms of canceling or postponing our shows for that reason. We think we've acted responsibly. It's become obvious, later on that you probably couldn't have had the shows, but I can tell you this, that I had a conversation with Hive in the beginning of March, and they said, Anil, if you still own the show, what would you do? And I said, I would not have the show if I still owned it. I would cancel it. They said, well, then we're going to cancel it. And at that time, it felt like it was an option to cancel it. It did not feel like it was the only path forward, or it was inevitable that it was going to get canceled. Mm-hmm. Within a week or so of that, it became obvious that the show couldn't happen. At the point in time when we made the decision, it was a choice to not move forward with the show. I think that as we look forward, what the B2B events industry, much like other industries on what I call the front line of impact, like airlines, cruise lines, hotels, restaurants, ultimately these businesses that are impacted on the front lines need a greater degree of certainty around COVID-19, its impact, how it's being addressed with therapeutics and a vaccine before those businesses can really ramp back up. And so the way I look at it is that we are living in this period of uncertainty. It is unclear how long that is going to last. But one thing I do believe is that we are not at the beginning of the end. We are at the end of the beginning here. There is still a lot that needs to unfold. So we have shifted our attention to creating what I refer to as omni-channel events. Borrowing a word from the retail industry and using a word that our communities understand very well. And that is a combination of online and offline as representing what the future of the event industry will be. So I think of integrating technology into offline events as the digitization of events. And I think of creating digitally native virtual events as the virtualization of events. So there's a distinction there between digitization and virtualization that I think is important. The way that we're approaching it is, I think, different from how everybody else has approached it. If I were to describe how everybody else has approached it, I would say that it is being focused on content, mostly webinars, and it has been largely, how do you take what you do offline and put it online? But going back to how I described, we created Shop Talk to begin with, which was sit down with a blank sheet of paper and address the challenges and opportunities and build the product from there. Whether it's something that your customers and clients know that they need or not, that should be the starting point. And that's what we did for our virtual events. So our virtual strategy has really been two-pronged. The first has been that instead of simply having speakers talk to what is going on in the industry and trends and the types of things that we might even cover on site, we think enough other people are doing that well enough that we don't add a whole lot of value there, getting back to needing to be 10x to 100x better for us to really be excited about doing anything. And so what we focused on in terms of content was creating a framework that presents the path forward for retail in various stages as the pandemic continues and as we come out of the pandemic. We created that framework as a Google Doc, as a Google Sheet. We shared that it's on our website. It's something that we update every single day. Our entire content team looks at news of everything from the pandemic to announcements from retailers about specific initiatives they're implementing. And we build that into the Google Sheet so that it is always up to date on how things are going to unfold through the various stages. We also included tabs recently to represent various scenarios of when therapeutics and a vaccine, for example, might become available. And so our focus on content has been a focus on what I call original content that we think provides a tool to the industry that helps them manage through all of the different things they have to manage through, all of the different considerations they have when it comes to evolving their businesses throughout the pandemic. The second area where we have focused is one we announced about 2 weeks ago. We announced it at the same time that we announced that we were going to cancel Shop Talk in September. And that is the creation of this concept of a meetup, a Shop Talk meetup. And the basic premise of the meetup program, which is scheduled to be held October 20th to the 22nd during 3 half days. So the meetup begins at 12:30 Eastern and ends at 4:45 Eastern on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, October 20th, 21st, and 22nd. The goal is to bring thousands of people together, not for content, not for speakers, and not for original content we've created, but instead so that those thousands of people can interact with each other. And that and we're designing it in a way so that they can interact with each other across all of the use cases, all of the reasons for which people interact with each other all the time in the retail and e-commerce industry, and certainly at our events. And so, so it is, maybe one way of describing it is it's the hosted program on steroids. It's not simply an evolution of the hosted program. This again was a sit down with a blank sheet of paper, as I mentioned, and it is a ground up technology build Obviously, there's a lot we know about how to build these things that comes from our experience with hosted. But the reality is that we took a look at the retail industry from scratch. We looked at what kind of data model is needed to represent all of the key people beyond hosted, which represents, as I mentioned before, a very specific marketplace within retail. Here with Meetup, we're looking at all of the different stakeholders, all of the different things they might do. So for example, the Meetup incorporates the notion of being able to make an announcement as part of this, where companies can make announcements to reach the media. And then some of the meetings that happen during that Meetup are companies that are making announcements and media. We already have over 100 representatives of the media and sell-side analysts signed up for the show, for the Meetup. So the way we're looking at it is that if the future is truly omni-channel, it's going to exist both with offline events and online events, then the online events should represent the greatest utility, the greatest degree of productivity. And that means ensuring that they address all of the use cases that people already are already out there and that people already engaged in. So that's the whole concept of Meetup. We're actually very, very excited about it. Since we launched it 2 weeks ago, over 2,000 people have signed up. It's really incredible. It is something we are charging for, so there are tickets, and the tickets have to be purchased. Ultimately, what we believe is that people will be very glad, very happy that they participated, because they will measure it in terms of productivity. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is, the easy way that we refer to it is, we're trying to deliver about 3 months worth of meetings in 3 half days. Even the approach of using half days means that people can commit those half days without losing anything relating to their ongoing work. They can spend the rest of that day doing their other work, having their other meetings, and not have to completely go away, for 3 days while they're doing this. So we think we've designed it in a way that makes sense, that will work. We think there's going to be a lot that we learn, and as we do iterations going forward, we'll incorporate that learning. We very much have a culture of learning and iteration, so this is definitely going to be version 1 of the program. But as a former, entrepreneur focused specifically on technology and now integrating technology into these live experiences, that is a very natural way for me and our team to operate. So we're very excited about not only the launch, but actually getting this first one under our belts, delivering what we think is value that people haven't experienced. In fact, a big part of what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks is really just explaining to people what it is we're doing. Those conversations don't take long for people to get it, but what we're finding is that it does in many cases require a conversation, because it is so unlike anything else that people have experienced. And it is certainly unlike all of the other virtual events that people have come to expect as a very frequent thing now.
Anil, it's no surprise that you're getting 2,000 attendees signing up. I mean, you've been quite the industry disruptor, kind of filling in gaps in the industry, which was sorely needed with these communities that you've graciously given us an hour to speak to. As we close it up today, I'd be shortchanging our listeners in the industry if I didn't ask you this 2-part question. Part A is, as an incredibly successful entrepreneur who has been able to find these gaps in industries and kind of bring significant value to the industry, what is your advice to other entrepreneurs out there? And part B is the all-important question that people are really waiting to get an answer on. What's next for Anil? Are you getting into other verticals?
2 really good questions. So the advice that I like to share with entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs that are just getting started, is something that my dad shared with me when I was first getting started. And that is, the most important thing is to just start and trust that opportunity finds you. And I think that really dovetails with this whole notion of you build great things through iteration. You don't need, to have a fully baked, fully articulated idea on day one. You need to have some sense that there is a problem or a new opportunity, given how the world is changing, that provides an opportunity for you to build something. But the key is to start building. And then that process of building is something that, that the universe engages with you on. You're not going to be doing it alone. You're going to be doing it in the context of something far bigger than you. And that's how you create exceptional products and experiences. So my advice is always get started and let the universe help you. In terms of what's next for me, I think I would probably have a clearer idea of what was next for me if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. I think that the effect that pandemic has had on me and the business that I've been in for the last 10 years, which is the events industry, is really to focus on how do we virtualize Shop Talk. So even though I've sold Shop Talk and I'm in a transition period with Shop Talk, the virtual build we're doing is through this other company that I mentioned, Persona Tech. They're set up 2 years ago to digitize Shop Talk and Grocery Shop, and now its focus is on virtualizing Shop Talk and Grocery Shop. And so for the foreseeable future, that is my focus. It's not what I expected to be doing. Frankly, I didn't know what I would be doing given the circumstances I shared relative to why we ended up selling Shop Talk and Grocery Shop to begin with. I have lots of other interests that I've been pursuing. I'd be happy to do a podcast with you guys on some of those. I'll share very quickly an area where I've been spending a lot of my time. I watched a movie about 4 years ago in 2016 called The Man Who Knew Infinity. And it was about the life of a mathematician named Srinivasa Ramanujan,
yep.
who was one of the 20th century's most important mathematicians, unfortunately one of the least known. And the story, and if you haven't seen the movie, I actually think knowing a little bit about the background of Ramanujan helps to appreciate the movie. So I don't think there's any spoilers in what I'm about to say. But the story of Ramanujan is the story of an individual who wrote down mathematical equations and formulas that have been the premise of a significant amount of mathematics for the last 100 years. He actually died 100 years ago. And when he was asked how he was able to come up with these formulas, he said that he had visions from God. It took me 4 years, but I wanted to develop a thesis of how was he able to come up with these formulas. This took me down, many, many different rabbit holes and different areas of research and inquiry. Very, very wide range of things that I had to learn about well beyond mathematics, into areas as diverse as cognitive neuroscience, fractal geometry, quantum biology, religion, astrophysics. And I'm actually working on a paper that I would like to, when I say paper, it's probably going to be a LinkedIn post. But I'm working on something that I believe squares what Ramanujan said in terms of how he was able to come up with the formulas with a lot of thinking in these other areas and disciplines. That's entirely consistent with how he would have been able to do this. The short of it is that our brains engage in complex calculations that are native to the universe. And we have little to no conscious awareness of those unconscious processes. Ramanujan had a particular kind of brain that's at the intersection of synesthesia and savant syndrome that gave him conscious access to this unconscious ability to process mathematics. And in fact, I have found someone who is alive today who had a traumatic brain injury that has given him a very similar ability. Wow. His name's Jason Paget, and Jason and I have been in touch on very frequent phone calls, and he and I have talked extensively about work that I could do with him, interviews that I could do with him to help him. He's already written one book, but write another book that focuses on what we can learn from his thinking. So, you know, I have lots of very broad interests. This is probably a much longer answer and in going in different directions than you expected. But right now, my focus is on, you know, on virtualizing events, but staying true to some of those other things that I wanted to do that represented the reason for selling ShopTalk and Grocery Shop in the first place. And I think I'm very fortunate in being able to do both of those.
Anil, thank you for joining us today. You over-delivered. Sheree and I are looking forward to our next conversation with you. We're really grateful to have you. And on a personal note, you're a very gracious person, and I'm very happy to call you my friend. So thank you. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. Thank you, and have a great day.
Anil.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. Take care.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.